OBIC board member. I'm really excited to be here with you this morning to kick off our panel on open banking success stories from around the world, why Canada should be next. But before we jump in, just a little housekeeping. Just wanted to let you know that we very much would like to take the last 10 minutes to focus on questions. So please use the Ask the Speaker button to facilitate any questions that you might have throughout the session, as well as if you'd like to chat with anybody within this session, click on the chat button. And please note that your microphone and video are obviously not accessible. And we will have this session running to try and answer all of your questions and impart some insights on what's happening around the world. So without further ado, I'd love to get started. And to give some frame what's happening around the world, open banking is a global movement. It has gained momentum since 2017 when the UK was first to launch an open banking ecosystem that was regulated to all CMA 9 to drive forth open banking. And since that date, the UK has now hit 5 million users as of last month. Quick to follow in Australia, in 2020, they launched their open banking ecosystem and have fast moved to open finance, open energy, and open telco. And as we look to Brazil, in the midst of the pandemic, moved through an open banking ecosystem to launch open banking and move towards open finance starting in 2021, as well as Singapore leading the way in Asia Pac and driving forth API playbooks that have been looked to be the golden standard of regulatory advice, as well as created a digital ID single pass and have created a central management for consent system. So I am so excited to have incredible expertise from around the world to help share insights of successes and challenges as open banking, open finance has been implemented around the world. First, we have Sahgal, who is the Senior Vice President of Open Banking Mastercard. Welcome. We also have Shivani Mukherjee, who is the Management Leadership at Thought Machine in Singapore. Good morning. And Simon Lyons, who is the Standard Transformational Lead at Pay UK. Before we get started, I'd love to go around the room and have you guys share brief details on your background and your current role. Maybe Shivani, we can start with you.
Yes, thanks for having me here, Michelle. I think I live in Singapore, so I'm going to be a primary advocate of what's going on in Asia Pacific. I come from an engineering background. I started my journey in consulting engineering, working with the legacy banks. I moved to startups as product manager. I built products across B2C and B2B domain in my stay around Grab Taxi, which moved into payments and then became a financial services unicorn across Asia Pacific, followed by my brief stay at Number 26, one of the rising challenger bankings in Europe in early 2018. And then I joined Rapid in its very early stage around Series A, and we became global unicorn in 18 months, kind of unleashing the payment network across B2B landscape in Asia Pacific and globally. At my current role in Thought Machine, I am strategic partnerships leader across Asia Pacific. We work in taking banks to the cloud, which is an extensive job in terms of core modernization, relieving banks from legacy infrastructure with an ecosystem play. That's my role, and nice to be here.
Thank you so much. And also one accolade is you're on the Women in Payments Global Council, which is where I have an honor to get to work with you. So thank you for being on this time zone with us this morning. Over to you, Sekhar. Share a little bit about your story and Mastercard.
Sure. Hi everyone. So it's Sekhar Sahgal. I'm pretty much an industry veteran in the payments industry. Been in multiple companies in Amex and Citi. Now I've been in Mastercard 11 years. It's been a great journey. In my current role, I focus on open banking and Mastercard's pretty much full on in open banking now. It's a big bet, and my role and my remit is to help us expand into international markets. We're seeing open banking in some way, shape, or form in 60 countries already and expanding, including Canada. My goal is to expand our global network in wherever open banking is present and play in the ecosystem.
Really exciting stat to start us off. 68 countries moving with open banking in some shape or form. Excited to dig into that. Simon Lyons.
Well, my role's probably a little bit more at the coalface. So I was 20 years a banker, and then I went to a fintech and took them through the accreditation for open banking when I taught them into it in 2017. So that was a 12-month process. And then I was lucky enough to be asked to join the open banking implementation entity, which was the first standards body for open banking in the world. I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing being first. I think there's lots of advantages and disadvantages to it. But during that time, I focused on industry. So I'm very, very lucky and proud to say that I'm one of the people that got the UK's tax authority to start using open banking. So it was the first sovereign government in the world. There was a lot came out of that and a lot of benefits came out of it. And my role now at Pay UK, you've had the boss on this morning, David Pitt, who's my CEO. And we are working on something now that works with SMEs, which aggregates open banking with tax records and with payments. So what we're trying to do is to define those use cases and define those really high value things that make a difference. So what it does, not how it does, but I'm very lucky to sit where I sit, and it's been a fun journey so far. I hope it carries on.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. We've sat on many panels together, and I am always excited. I'm going to start with you. My first question actually digs on what you just shared. Can you share the benefits that you see open banking unlocks for your region, or has already unlocked for the UK?
So I think it's probably, in some respects, quite a controversial answer, but we've got quite a lot of legacy in banking. There's not a lot changed. If we look at the step forward, the ATM was probably the last great step forward, which was 1968, I think, in New York. And from then, we've had customers that have accepted things that will be the way they are because there isn't a solution. I think if you expand the word open banking to say API-based banking, what you've got is you've got the chance that people can start the banking from where they wish. So we have been told by our banks where to start from. We've always had to use their digital channel, their branch, their telephone network, or whatever the manual interface is, maybe the branch if you still have them. And open banking's changed one thing for me. It's let people start the banking from where they want it to start. Good examples of that really would be, you look at people sharing accountancy statements, you look at our tax authorities taking payments. We have a big platform that I believe is over there in Canada as well called Just Giving, Blackboard, charity donations. And what it's done is it's a cliche phrase as well, but I would say that what it's allowed people to do is to get the bank they want, not the bank they're given. And I think that statement is something that's very powerful, that I can now bank how I want as a business or as a consumer or as a corporate. And we have seen the market drive us. So lots of people sat down and said what would happen. Not many of them were right. But there's lots and lots of big businesses out there, and people have said, well, this is what I want to happen. This is what drives my change. And I think what we've seen is we've been educated by the market a lot more. So not a lot of talk about open banking now, a lot of talk about legacy problems. But I think there's been an awful lot of value delivered by people saying, this has been my problem for a long time, fix it. And we're kind of bringing banking up to market reference.
Great way to look at it. I very much appreciate the simplicity of that and how the customer is first in that obvious new journey path. Shivani, can you share from an Asia Pac perspective or within Singapore, what do you believe it's unlocking or has already unlocked?
I think, well, Singapore is still a slightly advanced and sophisticated market when it comes to the banking population. But if you see overall Asia Pacific, I think we talk about unbanked a lot. But what we also see in this part of the world is a lot of underbanked, which means you may have a bank account, but you may still not have access to the banking financial products at the ease that another customer, a well-served customer in the bank would, right? So how do you solve for the underbanked and unbanked in a fragmented market where Philippines is so different than Indonesia and Malaysia is so different than Singapore? But if you want to talk about the use cases, I think it's more about where everybody has a smartphone, everybody has decent money to buy good food, take a cab, but they may not have a bank account which is fintech ready, API ready. In that case, I think the kind of use cases that we can really exploit in the market, as simple as a consumer can choose to shop from an e-commerce website and directly pay from bank account because there are APIs that an e-commerce platform could directly drill into your bank and then boom, the payment is done. What works here is for the small scale merchants, you really empower them to save that cost that they pay to the credit card companies at the back of a transaction. So you're not only empowering the customers, but also empowering the merchants to make money every transaction, or rather save the money. And I know this would not go well for the credit card company representatives here, but that's one use case. I think if you need to talk about a couple of other use cases, just the sheer ease of onboarding the unbanked population into a banking world. Banks have realized that the customer acquisition cost is so high because there is kiosk, there is a marketing, and the traditional distribution is expensive. So now think about CIMB. It's a Malaysian bank which has a digital banking license in Philippines. And then there is this big customer segment having a hold on a local payment method called the Gcash wallet. And all CIMB had to do was, hey, you have a Gcash wallet. You may not have a bank account, but you have a mobile number, so you have a wallet ID. If you want to open an account in CIMB, just here is an API integration. Click on the link from your wallet, and you'll get a CIMB account embedded within your Gcash wallet. That's the power that local alternate payment methods. So it's the other way around. Banks were seen to be the access and the entry gates for consumers to financial products. Here are innovative fintech financial products giving people, consumer, the access to banks. So little fintech companies are like, banks, we are here to help you. That's the reverse game. That's the power of open banking that can really unleash, in Asia Pacific.
Thank you, Shivani. Great. I'm very interested in this G wallet concept, but I think that's such an important comment. It's the fintechs also feeding new clients to the banks in a safe and secure way. Sekhar, from a Mastercard perspective, in 68 countries, you guys are seeing this unfold. Can you share what you believe that it's unlocking for the markets that you're focused on, or that are moving the fast?
Definitely, right? And so what's interesting is, there's some markets that are fully regulated, like with Europe and Australia, but there's markets where regulation is still in the works, but open banking is still happening, right? The industry is moving, they're seeing what's happening, and in some ways that's happening in Canada as well. But if you look at it, there's really 4 big buckets of use cases we're seeing, specifically in open banking, right? Yes, there's open APIs to open accounts, etc. But the 4 themes where we're seeing efficiencies, improvements, better experiences, and innovations for consumers and small businesses is in the account onboarding journey, right? Whether it's opening a wallet, opening a bank account, opening a credit product, the ease of getting the information, smoothing out the process, removing manual processes in that process, making it digital, making it 5 minutes versus days. That's a big advantage that open banking brings. The other piece, and I think Shivani sort of highlighted that a bit, was in the lending space, right? How do you improve underwriting? And it helps both the banked and the underbanked consumer, right? So it's what if I'm credit invisible, or I have a thin credit file? I still have transactional data, whether it's in my wallet or in my bank, and how can I adjudicate a customer and give them mainstream credit based on that, or give them benefits for that, right? And you can see some big use cases in Europe and US actually. So Experian uses our product it's called Experian Boost, to boost a customer score, right? Based on their bill payment history and consistency in paying bill payments, how people receive income, how people make payments. Those are all real-time, really good tools to help in a better credit journey. The third is on the financial management standpoint. That's generally the first use case most markets tend to go to, is personal financial management or business financial management, and helping a customer manage their finances better. That usually evolves into something bigger with loyalty or giving some offers and sort of those kind of use cases. But then the fourth one, which is also really big, that's been Simon's bread and butter, right, is in payment initiation, right? And how do you make payments a better payments journey? And I know Shivani spoke about credit card fees and all, right? But for Mastercard, our view, we made big bets, right? Our view is make the best journey for the consumer, right? We are a multi-rail company, is how we prove it. We run the real-time payments infrastructure in UK. We run ACH in UK. We run so we are our goal is to make sure a consumer and a business gets the best payment experience. Each rail has advantages and disadvantages based on the use case you're solving for. and we want to be there and be part of every payment journey, right? Like that's our goal, and how you enable it. So that's how we view the world right now, and we see open banking playing a big role in many of these payment journeys, and we want to be part of that.
Yeah, thank you. And that brings me to a really important question. When we're building this infrastructure, and Canada, as we all know, is a little bit, farther behind from the UK, 2017, and Australia 2020, and then Brazil 2021. And we're looking at an 18-month roadmap from March. So that kind of, I think if I do the math correctly, puts us at June 2024. How important do you believe not only read but write access is for open banking to unlock the aspects for consumers and SMEs and government? And maybe I'll start with Simon.
So you've got to qualify something first of all, which is we only have talked about banking in the legacy years of banking about access to the bank account, whereas now you have something completely different. We've never ever been able to aggregate banking before. So if you had a banking channel for your small business customers, the big guys have always had Swift and they've had TMS systems and they've had all these big monolithic ones. The card rails have had more complex data sets than anybody else. That's why the travel industry absolutely loves cards. That's why Sabre, Galileo, and the GDS all really work well. We've now got the chance to change that. So when you say write access, I'm going to give you probably a little bit of a tangential answer, but it's this: it's where you write. Now, for instance, if I was given a tax record in Canada, assuming I was a Canada taxpayer, I couldn't fit that into 18 characters. But if I could write to my tax record at the same time as my payment, or I could write to the tax record and use my account for verification as identity, as Shekhar and Shivani both alluded to before, suddenly what you've got there is an incredibly powerful uplift in your banking offering. And the banking is only one part of the aggregated solution. So when you define right, you've got to look at it in a very, very specific and specialized manner about what the use cases are, where it'll be used, how you would give consent for that, I think is absolutely critical. But the value of, I'll give it a really simple word, remittance. We've always sent remittances separate to payments apart from in travel on those cards. Travel is brilliant at it. I've stolen so many ideas from the travel industry, I can't begin to tell you. I've plagiarized them and taken them on loan. We now have the chance with bank accounts to use them both for identity, both for hosts of data, both for controlling data, and also to be able to write additional data to third-party sources. So when you think about write, don't just think about it about the banking industry, right? Think about those APIs being open enough to say, well, I can write to my tax record, I can write to my insurance company, I can write on my home insurance policy, I can write on my car insurance policy for change of details. I think it's crucial. But, Michelle, I've got to qualify it. You can't run before you can walk. Open banking in the UK has taken massive evolutions. As Shekhar just said before, we started off with like PFM models and people aggregating and stuff. It's very, very quickly, become aggregated in the bank account, the bank apps now as well. We've now moved on to people embracing payments a little bit, and we've got a big exchange of data. I believe we're about 3 evolutions away yet from maturity, maybe 10. And I think as the people work out the use cases, you find out that the use of write and the use of data being written back to the bank account maybe and also back to third parties is where the true value is. And that's the true aggregation of third party services, the payment, and the bank account. So to answer your question very simply, write's critical, but don't just define it to the banking experience. It could go to third party ledgers as well and third party vestibules. We have a system in the UK called Request to Pay. It's a Pay UK product as well. It's a messaging service. So it means that people that are getting small businesses, they can get the payment, but at the same time, they get additional data. So your point is that's writing something. It's taking it all right back. So I think it's the evolution, but it takes time. We're making big changes to people's psyches here, and we've got to give them the chance to consume it and to take this change on board and to know they're dealing with trusted people. But I think it's crucial.
Love all the insight unpacked within that comment, and I think it does speak volumes of the opportunity at hand. Shivani, any thoughts on that same kind of right perspective beyond just read?
I think from the market that I come in, which is still not as mature, it's taken to be slow in terms of open banking. I could have a theoretical opinion about what right access should look like, but I think the risks around right access should be very, it should be briefly looked into. It should be meticulously worked around, because while with right access, as Simon said, it's not just for the banks. It could be applicable easily on the third parties. So are we having a regulated framework around it as to what you can write? What does the journey look like? And what are the touch bases in the customer journey where right access can actually be delivered and can actually, it's essentially modification of data forward, right? Like how do you pass modified data to the next set of financial institutions or third party in the journey of a consumer data? So for me, I think I do not see like a real time approach to right access just yet in my market, but coming from a very theoretical, a very product based approach is how do you manage the risk around it when you actually implement it? And it should be more of experiment, test, and improvise as you implement it.
Yeah, great insights. And I think what's shared is really it's a stepped approach, right, to move into right access. And maybe Shekhar, what would be a good use case to test based on what you're seeing in 68 countries, if you had one at the top of mind?
I mean, in my mind, payments is the first use case for right access in some ways. You're initiating an action from outside the bank, and that's the biggest one. And again, there's many ways of doing payments. You're still solving for recurring payments and other ways of doing all kinds of payments, but just basic payment initiation where you're outside your banking experience and you're telling the bank to initiate a payment on your behalf is the first step towards right that we're seeing evolving in most markets, right? Like that's the first basic use case. To Simon's point, there's a North Star that we'll have to get to, but it's let's solve for the beginning first, right? If you don't solve for now, then the North Star doesn't matter because people won't get there, right? Like you take steps. Like look at even the iPhone, how it evolved, right? We started without an app store, and created an app store, things added on, and now you have all these kind of features. And we got to evolve with the market, go with the core use cases, the main pain points in the market, solve for them, prove it out, right? And once they're proved out, we'll keep building on it because there's going to be thousands of ideas and thousands of visions, but solve the basics first, right? Like that's my thing. And so based on the market, if you're looking at markets like Indonesia or Nigeria, payments is probably the first use case you go with because that's what you're solving for in the market. In Canada, it'll be a really good use case, but I'm not sure that's the only first use case to go with, right? And given that they're still building out real-time payments for consumers, so maybe that's the thing you wait for, right? And then you sort of move ahead with. So it's solve for the use cases that matter for the market, and right will that be there? It will come, but we will evolve there, right? It's just how Simon put it really well. So
yeah,
the first iPhone didn't have a camera.
Now they have 4.
Exactly.
Well, I think that brings me to the use case I'm really excited to highlight here as well. So Simon, can you share a little bit about what's happened with the use case of you helping the government actually use open banking to get in tax payments? Because not many people know about this important use case enabled by open banking.
So really simply, I was lucky enough to be the person that dealt with the UK government, and they were exploring open banking, and the actual effort they've made is actually an exploration project. It's discovery, and they thought, so we pay quite a lot of card fees, and the problem with cards is not everybody's got one, number one, and they are a truly wonderful instrument. But the thing is, there was really no alternative to cards for high value payments. If you couldn't go and log on your bank, we've got all these methods of working out beneficiaries now. So the government went out to have a look at the market, and they were going to do a discovery contract. It was called a direct award. And the most valuable thing that I think I did, if I can claim that, be as bold, is we looked at the whole way that they procure. And we looked at the type of businesses they procure with. Because if you want open banking to work, with all due respect to the wonderful names on the phone, Thought Machine and SVP, you're both pretty big businesses. But if you want some really fast innovation, we need some very small businesses to go and win these prizes, win some of them. Now, I had no idea who was going to win it, but what we did do is we worked with the HMRC to actually look at performance. Not to look at coverage, to look at performance and to say, this is what you can do. And they awarded their contracts in the January. As a little fintech, one of our open banking providers, never heard of them beforehand, and they delivered it in 6 weeks. Now, there's some really interesting outcomes that came out of this. They didn't advertise it. We have 31 heads of duty in the UK, 31 kinds of tax that we can collect it. So they launched it with 4 methods of taxation. And there was quite a big spike in the first couple of weeks. And then they went with another 27. And there were still no emails. There was still no complaints. There was still nothing because it didn't say open banking. It said pay by bank. Now, what that's done is it's become, I'd be fairly let me put it this way. I can't quote you the numbers. The collections are in the billions. They're not in the millions or the hundreds of millions. They're in the billions. And the number of transactions is in the millions because a tax payment is quite high value. But what it's done is something much more valuable. HMRC, I was on the phone to them right before this call as well, are exploring now about 9 other elements of this. So things like, how do you assess affordability? So to the point was made before by both Shivani and Sekhar about the bank account is a much more accurate representation of people's affordability than any credit score. The only reason we use credit scores is because we couldn't get to the bank account fast enough. It's very easy. It really is. Now, think about it like this. The tax authorities, if you've got debt with the tax authority, you're in a bad shape. So maybe you've got some weeks you can pay and some weeks you can't. What we're exploring at the moment is how they can have affordability, which is dynamic. So we can pay more one week, less the week after. We can pay more in October. We can pay less in July. We can look at seasonal as well. And the outcome of this is that the Discovery Award, which is what this was as well, is definitely not going to be a Discovery Award. This will be an integral part of the UK tax system. We now have 31 heads of duty on there. There are 5 initiatives, to my knowledge, which stretch from identity, affordability, removal of manual checks, removal of manual paper instruments, verification of bank account details, and they've just gone absolutely Beyo for it. The biggest problem the tax authority have at the moment is that a lot of other big corporates want to steal their staff that have done this because they're all very keen on finding out how they did it. So I'm really proud to say that the UK had the first sovereign government in the land that adopted open banking. I'm incredibly proud to be a part of it as well. But if I said at the moment they might be collecting, around about, I don't know, 1%, 2% of collected tax, I would expect that to go to well over 10% in the next 2 years. Little anecdote at the end of it for you. I think open banking is a pretty bad name because the word open would cause alarm to quite a lot of things. I think smart banking, I think we had this conversation last time, Michelle, was a really smart one. Nowhere in the journey for the successful use cases I see is the word open banking or the phrase used. It's about trusting the person you engage with and about trusting them to provide you with a safe method of payment, of data exchange, of validation of identity. And I think that's a really key point, that we don't need to tell people what it is. We need to tell them who they're working with are safe and secure. And I think that's one of the biggest keys to success at the moment is that if you trust anybody, you might not like them, but you trust your tax authorities. And I think that's one of the greatest growth patterns they had, the fact that they got that. They had one email, one bank thought that it was fraudulent and they froze somebody's accounts because the operator on the phone wasn't aware of what it was. One email, one in what now we got 15 months of tax collections and millions of payments and billions of pounds collected. It's gone pretty well.
Sounds like a pretty incredible success story in the sense of open banking. And I love how you call it smart banking. When you think about telco number porting, that only happened in Canada, 4 or 5 years ago, but we don't make it a complex open number statement. We just say port your number. It's porting data. And you don't know how they do it, but you go into a new telco, you get a new plan, and then your magical number comes with you without you having to understand how they facilitated the change. So I think that point of calling it pay with bank seems to be a quite crucial point for consumer adoption. So thank you so much for sharing that, Simon. I'm excited for the world to take on the accessibility, because I think it's not just a UK problem. It's kind of a world problem, accepting and chasing payments that have been made, but just can't be, reconciled properly due to some number.
That's huge. I mean, the scourge of banking is the suspense account. Our friends in the card industry will know that they don't get that because they collect the data at the point of purchase and they aggregate the reconciliation data, the apportionment data with the transaction. We can't do that in banking, but we can with open banking. So the most important message of those payments that are processed isn't the value, isn't the tens of millions saved in card fees. Every one went to the right account. Every single one. They're perfect push payments with the right data next to them to allocate them. Now, if you talk to a corporate treasurer or an accountant that runs a high volume business, their first question, what's your biggest problem? I'll guarantee you that 9 out of 10 will say the suspense account. So we're on legacy again here. This is a 50-year-old problem. Fix the suspense account. You fix probably the biggest problem in high volume banking. That's what I used to do for a living. It was the scourge of it. It's $1 billion solve. It really is. That for me is the one. But we tend to make it a little bit too technical for me. These are old problems that we're bringing to market and we're fixing. And I think there's a lot there to say. Sorry, I've spoken too much.
You have
Again.
no, thank you for the insight. I do want to remind the audience, you can put your questions within the chat. We will try and save the last 10 minutes, but we're coming close. So Shivani, when you're looking at the open banking ecosystem, what's the use case that's most exciting you? I know what's most exciting Simon.
I think uh, coming from a very emerging market, I think any use case that really puts the power back into the hands of consumers, which also kind of is a test for how much safe, how much resilient, how great infrastructure of security that banks, the regulators can provide to the consumers is something that will always excite me, because you're kind of low stress testing here, right? You're giving all power in the hands of the consumer, and then you're kind of putting the banks, the FIs, the fintech companies under this extreme pressure that we are giving you all the framework to go unleash this data, make money for yourself, provide value, but make sure we are keeping an eye on you. You make one move and you're out of the business, right? So this is where a truly financial inclusion can grow. So for me, use cases, as I said, it's not just about banking the unbanked, but it's like truly banking the underbanked. Why is somebody with a bank account but is away from financial products like lending, like investments, like insurances for that matter? How can you go from non-contextual insurances to contextual insurances as well for any landscape of customer cohorts that you see? And so while I'm trying to tell a broader use case, but the essence of it is, start from the micro level, where I would see a farmer not struggling, like even if he doesn't have the money to just buy the basics for the next 1 quarter of his farming, for example, his fertilizers, the needs that he needs for the land. It's not a massive loan that he has to go and buy a tractor or infrastructure of workforce. It's just the basic quarter loan. Even that is not accessible. Banks, who have all the power, all the data, all the capital in the world, are not able to empower, go truly enable financial inclusion on the ground. And that's where open banking can come in and say, no consumer is different. If you have access to a smartphone, if you have access to an intent of payment, here is your credit. Here is what you're rewarded with. We are trusting you with the money to come back. And that's where open banking for me is going to do wonders. It's going to give back to this economy like the legacy could not.
I love that. So we have empowering consumers, helping governments save money. Sekhar, what else is exciting you? What's that big use case that's got you excited for these 68 countries you're working?
Sure. I mean, at the end of the day, it's for us, it's open banking enables innovation, right? And every day you see really smart startups come up with really cool ideas of how to use it in different ways, shapes, and form, right? They're way smarter than any of I mean, I am at least, but it's, can we enable them to do that? Some interesting use cases, right? If I put my Canada hat on, right, and this is looking at Canada pre-COVID, right? Obviously, 2 years was a little different, but the migrant segment in Canada is huge, right? And it's if I forget, it was a certain percentage of the population. And they generally come in, they're relatively affluent. Every bank wants them, right? Because they are a very strong customer for the bank, but you cannot underwrite them because they don't have credit history. It's a whole process and pain that they have to go through. Is there a way with open banking that we can serve them better, right? To improve that journey. And that's a huge one opportunity that sort of stands out. Again, like I said, in the lending space, there's tons of use cases, tons of opportunities, improving costs for banks, improving processes for the consumers, creating a better experience across the board. You'll see stuff coming everywhere, right? You have companies like Drop in Canada right now, sort of using open banking, creating really good experiences from a loyalty standpoint into consumers, right? Giving them offers where they're not part of your banking experience, they're sitting outside of your banking experience. So you'll see a lot more of that sort of come through once open banking is defined in the market, right? Where people are not afraid of coming in. But there's tons of use cases. You can look at the neighbors down in the US. Who there's a lot that's happened there. There's a lot in Europe, and those are the those are sort of the insights into what you'll see evolve in other markets.
Yeah, thank you, Shekhar. And I think to that point, like Canada, we have our roadmap that has been given by the you know committee and in August, and it hasn't been confirmed that we're following this exact roadmap, but it is within the hands of our open banking lead, which we're all ecstatic has been appointed in mid-March, Abraham. So knowing that we're here and we've got a leader, we're not regulatory led. We're looking at a market led perspective. Maybe we can still have this thought of what advantages do you foresee from regulatory led to market led as we kind of look at this to ensure that we move fast as well as we empower the consumer and an SME. So just looking regulatory wise, maybe Shivani, just looking at the fact that you guys have a playbook of APIs, maybe you can share a little insight to that.
Yeah, so I think, well, Asia is still slow, very top driven, regulatory driven, but the insights say otherwise. Like I think our market is still having, you know, uh, it is still hasn't figured out which is the best model that we want to go. They're testing on both sides, but we still see a predominantly top-driven, regulatory-driven approach. But that said, if you go on the regulatory initiatives, Monetary Authority of Singapore and the banking conglomerate came up with guidelines in early 2016. They launched a comprehensive list of APIs, and they also made some APIs public, right? Which is owned by the regulator. But at the same time, if you see market initiatives, I think back in mid 2015, this is even before COVID, right? There was an innovation plan with one of the leading banks in the region where there were 1,000 plus experiments in API. Eventually, we saw initiatives like Connect to OCBC, then Citibank Singapore had launched this global developer hub, that opened, its first platform in Singapore, enabling, across 8 APIs, enabling 51 or 52 plus operations. And if you see even today, we have this SG Findex where, through your sync pass, you can consolidate entire customer data at one point, have that holistic view. So we see that there are steps taken by regulators, and then there is this market initiative by the banks, which is getting more technology up, more microservices API up, and also opening, having sandbox, giving the fintech companies to embed and come closer into the ecosystem, right? That's happening. But what's also happening really, really well is this community drive where the regulator is getting more fintechy. So we have our chief fintech officer, the office around fintech and innovation, which is from a regulator control point, driving innovation into the fintech sector, inviting market opportunities, giving it a hallmark of the regulator, making the consumer feel that, okay, even though it is a fintech driven initiative, we see a brand of a regulator out there, right? Because in the end of the day, open banking is a business where you are designing and building for trust. You are thinking consumer data rights first. And if you are not living up to these pillars, open banking, Intel banking, smart banking, whatever you want to call it, will not see a future, will never get closer to the North Star that Simon was talking about. So this is what the market trend looks like here, and with regulatory kind of trying to keep their hallmark on top of it. And it's an interesting blend. It's just that we haven't mandated anything. We haven't like really quoted and framed guidelines just yet, but that keeps market open to more innovation, flexibility, and we will get the best of breed maybe in future. I think that's what it's looking like. But I would love to hear more from Simon and Shekhar.
Yeah, for sure. Sheikh, do you want to go first?
Sure. I mean, so I think the goal is, what's the end vision, right? The end goal is to have open APIs, right? Like, and whatever path gets you there, and do it in a way where it's standardized, right? That simplifies things for the industry. If every bank opens up APIs to their own specs, and there's tons of banks or there's other resources opening up to their own specs, it just makes it more complicated, right? So the goal is, how do you get standards in the industry, and how do you get folks to open it up? Now, if do you need regulation to mandate banks to open up? If you can drive the industry to voluntarily participate, as long as you get to the end goal, I think that's fine. And it depends on each market is driven differently, right? And has incentives that are different. Like we know FDX Canada is looking at building standards out. If that pans out and everyone opts in, I think at the end you will need some regulation, at least as guardrails, because people need to know who's liable if something goes wrong, if something happens. At least putting, putting that framework is extremely important. But how prescriptive or how much regulation has to mandate is going to be on a country by country basis. And as you said, in Canada, it tends to be more of a joint relationship, right? Government and industry sort of work together and drive things, and that's the way things go. So I'm assuming that's how open banking will also evolve in the market. And given that the industry is already working together from an FDX standpoint, but we know people are waiting to see what comes out of with the new leader being sort of appointed, and how much it stays close or how much it deviates, right? So clarity is always helpful, so the market knows where it's going. But I'm not sure it's an easy opinion versus should you be regulated or not. Some regulation is good. The end is to get to some standards and make it easy for the industry to evolve, right? Don't want them to you remove all the barriers that are there to get this going.
Yeah, yeah. No, thank you, Shivani and Shekhar. Great insights from Singapore and just in general, right? We have to move in the right direction, and everybody, no matter what, has to work together. I think whether it's regulatory driven or if it's market driven. Simon, insights from the UK. We don't have too much time left, but if you can give us some short insights, I also want to ask everybody, what are some lessons learned that Canada could pay attention to from your markets as we go to move forward? So kind of two questions to you, and then I'll come around with everyone.
So the quick one for me is you can have all the technology in the world and all the regulations that list there as well and stuff, but if you want to keep it to the monoliths, then that's the way to do it. You've got to be able to energize your market. You've got to be able to let the smaller, the innovative, the quick, the agile come and work. And the only way you do that is by getting big business and people to trust them. So I think the accreditation regime that you create is actually more important than standards, and I work in standards. That's my job. So I think the two go hand in hand. I think don't underestimate the power of You can comply with the regulation and fail. You can't comply with the standard and reach the standard and fail because you've reached a required level. We look at all of them through the years, FATCA, PCI DSS, look at all those good things that, killed some of us when we were working in those. I am really, that I'm a real advocate of making sure that the market can function, and the market demands have to function by trust. And that trust isn't just between the consumer and the bank account, it's between the big businesses engaging with the little businesses and the medium businesses engaging with the medium businesses, not just big business to big business. You've got to energize them and make them work. I mean, lessons learned, standards is the way to go forward, and the trust framework is so powerful, so powerful. It really is. It can be used for so many different things. It's a cert regime, and that means that what you can do is you can reuse that cert for so many different things. Imagine having all your lending in a cert that you hold in a directory, so you move from bank to bank easier because you've got your records there, your credit limits, your loans, your credit score, your records all held. It's not difficult to get to that far as well. That's certainly something that I think about with my colleagues as well. UK was first. I think we've said this before. Being first isn't the best. It's first is good. It's got a great deal of kudos with it as well. But there's mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. It's human. The second will not make as many. The third won't make as many. The fourth won't make as many. But they're evolutions in different territories. So for me, if I said one thing to Canada, I'll use the words of Nick Down, head of payments at HMRC. Take the plunge.
Thank you, Simon. Yeah, very concise and great insight. Accreditation model. Yeah, that's definitely
Crucial.
something Canada needs to work on and look to other markets as we go to draft something. And it's some of the work we're trying to do at OBIC just as market driven, right? We're just trying to come together and create a draft accreditation model and pass it forth if it seems to help us get there faster. But Shivani, yeah, and I'll definitely chat with you on that. But Shivani, just thoughts on the sense of, things that Singapore has done that maybe is a lesson learned that Canada should try and avoid or learn from.
Yeah, I think beware of fines. That's one thing. But I think what Singapore, Monetary Authority of Singapore, like literally says that every service which is critical has to be up 99.5% of the year, which means like you're allowed to have at a max of 4 hours of downtime in a year, right? That's massive. That tells how much the regulatory is pushing for financial services up and working for the consumers across the year. And if this is the kind of limits or pressure that is even on deemed on legacy infrastructure, right? And then you talk about open banking, you talk about real-time APIs. You need to be really careful that your APIs work, that there is a routing and optimization logic behind your APIs. There is a plan B if one of your critical services or APIs are down. And how do you manage that downtime? How do you quickly escalate the information to your consumers, to your backend, your financial, your technology partners, and solve for it? That's very important. And it's not just because of the fine. It's also because with open banking, I think with every great innovation comes a great responsibility to outserve your customers, and you need to live up to that, right? So that's another lesson, that is a hidden philosophical lesson behind this, right? And last but not the least, API abuse. Technology is an instrument, it's also a weapon. So how do you safeguard? How do you protect? As I always say, open banking is a business of trust. It's a design of trust first. And if you falter at that, the North Star is never going to be there, right? So that is something that Canada must look at. You cannot say you are a technology first infrastructure and you go to a downtime every 1 week.
Very, very good point, and so crucial. Uptime and accessibility, and it's so crucial. And Shekhar, coming over to you, you've seen the world from a Mastercard lens. What can you impart on Canada as a lesson learned from maybe another market?
Yeah, given we short time, I'll summarize it, right? Because I agree with all the stuff that's been said, right? But at a high level, we need standards. We need to make sure you get trusted parties on board, right? In licensing or accreditation aspect. The key is also, it's all about consumer trust. But how do you balance the rules you place on ensuring the consumer trust in the consent process or whatever it is versus creating a good consumer journey, right? Because you can create the most trustworthy process, which is the worst consumer experience as well. So you have to balance the two. And then that, I think the industry is still solving for. I don't think we've solved for it across the board, but that's just an important balance to keep in mind. Is data privacy very important, but consumer journey and ease and consumer understanding important, and balancing the two. Obviously, standards, licensing, trust, and then there's a lot of operational details that I know we can take from Europe, on the how long you keep consent for and tokens for, and there's recurring debates, but I'm not going to get into that right now. There's a ton of stuff that we should take a look at and see what's working and not working, and then build on that.
Yeah. Thank you so much, guys. I would love to talk for another hour, but unfortunately we've run out of time. This has been such a pleasure to have all of you together. Thank you for your time. Thank you, Payments Canada. And I look forward to our next chat to try and continue to drive open banking forward around the world.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful day. Thank you for everybody listening.